The following program is being brought to you on the Voice America Variety Channel. For more information about our network and to check out additional show hosts and topics of interest, please visit voiceamericavariety.com. The Voice America Talk Radio Network is the worldwide leader in live Internet talk radio. Visit voiceamerica.com. The views and ideas expressed on the following program are strictly those of the hosts or guests and do not necessarily reflect the views and ideas held by the Voice America Talk Radio Network, its staff, and management.
Good afternoon. Welcome to Relationship Radio with your host, Jim Duzak. Are you interested in marriage, divorce, midlife dating? Keep it tuned right here for the next hour as Jim and his guest explore some fascinating and important topics. Now, here's your host, Jim Duzak.
Hello, and welcome to Relationship Radio. I'm Jim Duzak. I'm a divorce lawyer and mediator, a columnist for ConnectionsForWomen.com and BoomerLiving.com, and the author of the book Midlife Divorce and the Rebirth of Commitment. At one time, I even owned a dating service. You can learn more about me if you'd like by visiting my website, www.attorneyatlove.com. And although this is not a call-in show, I do love to hear from listeners after the show is over. So if you have a question, a comment, or a suggestion, please email me at jim@attorneyatlove.com. I'll do my best to get back to you the same day. My guest today is Lauren M. Bloom. Lauren is the author of the highly praised book, The Art of the Apology, How to Apologize Effectively to Practically Anyone. As soon as I read about Lauren and her book, I wanted her to come on the show because I've always believed that the refusal of someone to apologize, and apologize sincerely, is one of the biggest sources of frustration and resentment in marriages and other men-women relationships. In an article I once wrote, I quoted a British novelist who said, "How often could things be remedied by a word? How often it is left unspoken." That's really true. Lauren is a graduate of Yale University and the Columbus School of Law at Catholic University, where she graduated first in her class. She also has an advanced degree in labor law from Georgetown University Law Center. For over 20 years, she was a practicing lawyer in Washington, D.C., including 14 years as the general counsel of the American Academy of Actuaries. More recently, she founded Elegant Solutions Consulting, a firm dedicated to helping business executives and professional people build trust with their clients and customers by incorporating higher ethical standards into their everyday practices. Lauren's website is www.artoftheapology.com. Lauren, it's a pleasure to have you on Relationship Radio.
Well, thank you, Jim. It's a pleasure to be here, and I appreciate the invitation.
Well, I'm happy to have you. With a background like you have in law and business, how did you come to be so interested in apologies that you not only wrote a book on the subject, but started a consulting business that in part deals with educating business leaders on how to apologize?
Well, it started from some experiences I had during my time as counsel for the actuaries. I quickly discovered in working with them that clients didn't really necessarily want to bring lawsuits when a problem occurred or a mistake was made. But lawsuits tend to happen when people either are very angry or don't know what happened and feel that bringing a lawsuit is the only way that they can find out. And in working with my actuary clients, what I discovered was an effective apology would heal relationships, restore trust, and prevent lawsuits. In fact, I found that when my clients apologized effectively, they were more trusted by their clients because their clients felt that they'd been straightforward and honest and humble enough to admit when they were wrong and to try to make amends.
Well, you know, I remember from my own law practice when I did personal injury cases that, you know, most of the time if a person, let's say, slipped on the floor in a McDonald's and you know, broke her ankle or something, she didn't hate McDonald's, you know. I mean, she'd be back there a week later on crutches. You know, all the person really wanted was just adequate compensation. But if the McDonald's manager or employee had behaved rudely to this person and had said something like, you know, well, you know, if you hadn't been so fat or if you hadn't been, you know, so stupid as to try to read while you were walking or something, those cases were almost impossible to settle because the person wanted what the insurance system wouldn't give them, and that is an apology.
Exactly. People want to be treated kindly. They want to be respected. And that's true as much in personal life as in business. And what I discovered, my book started out as an article on how to apologize to clients and customers and why your lawyer might tell you not to, and that is one of the chapters in the book. Mm-hmm. But along the way, I started collecting stories from friends and family about other situations where they had seen an apology work well or not well, and all of a sudden, the book grew into a few chapters and then a few more, and all of a sudden I had a full-blown manuscript on my hands.
It's a really good book, too, I can tell our listeners. I've read the whole thing, and I really enjoyed it. And it just amazes me that when you think that this is a world where people are, probably more than at any other time in our history, that people are engaged in thoughtless and sometimes just out-and-out rude conduct, it's surprising that there wasn't a book like this before. But certainly came out at a good time, I'll tell you.
Well, thank you. I think there's a real need for it. There are compilations of apologies where often what they're doing is laughing at the people who made the mistakes in the first place. Mm-hmm. There are academic books about apologies, but mine is the only one I know of that really takes you through a process from start to finish to figure out when to apologize, how to apologize, what to say, what not to say. Yep. What format to use, whether to use a gift or not, how you need to follow up, and what you need to do to make sure that your apology is going to be effective so the relationship comes out as strong or stronger than before.
I think one of your chapters, in fact, is probably you could describe it as the central chapter of your book, the 6 essential elements of an effective apology. And maybe we could start our discussion there because it really touches on a lot of the things that you just mentioned. I think you said that the first element of a good apology is say you're sorry, but sincerely.
Absolutely. There are other phrases that people try to use. We regret any inconvenience. That's not an apology. You can try other phrases, but the only words that are absolutely golden every time are, I'm sorry.
Yep.
If you don't say that, you're not going to sound as sincere as you will with those 2 simple words, I'm sorry. And sincerity is a funny thing. It has to be there. You have to be sincere when you say it. But the other person has to appreciate your sincerity as well. So you both have to be sincere and sound sincere. And the 2 things aren't necessarily the same.
I know in the context of men-women relationships, a lot of times, with people will admit they're sorry or say they're sorry, there's always a but after it. It'll be, I'm really sorry for what I said, but if you hadn't provoked me, I wouldn't have said it in the first place. That's really not much of an apology, is it?
Oh, that's a great way to botch an apology. I've listed a few of my favorites in another chapter. Mm-hmm. And blaming the person you're apologizing to is one of the best. I mean, you might as well not even bother. If you're going to say, well, I'm sorry, but you did, whatever you did.
It's almost like what little kids sometimes say when they mess up. Look what you made me do.
Exactly. And how adult are we? If you're adult enough to recognize that you need to make an apology, you're adult enough not to try to foist the blame onto the person you're apologizing to.
Well, the thing, part of it is, I suppose, that it's normal for someone to want to seem like the kind of person that would only say or do something nasty if he is provoked. You don't want to sound like somebody who just out of thin air just decided to insult the other person. So it in some ways is probably natural for somebody to want to defend himself in that.
Well, I think it's reasonable to make an explanation for why you did or said whatever it was. But the thing is, it can't be defensive. Because if it's defensive, then you're not really interested in healing your relationship with the other person. You're only interested in making yourself look good. So if you can say, I'm really sorry I said that to you, I think you can then say, if you then say, but I wouldn't have if you hadn't done X, well, you don't know what you wouldn't have done. Mm-hmm. I think what you can say is, I'm really sorry for what I did. When you did X, I just got so angry or so hurt or so offended or I just flew off the handle and I shouldn't have done that. That's factual, and it's an explanation. But when you start pointing fingers, boy, that sincerity goes right out the window. And usually it's going to start another fight.
Right. I think your second element of the 6 elements of effective apologies is take responsibility. How does someone take responsibility?
And that ties right into what we were talking about. Mm-hmm. If you say, I would never have done that if you hadn't, look what you made me do.
Right.
Then you're not taking responsibility. You're foisting responsibility off on someone else.
Yeah.
For that matter, if you say, I'm really sorry I said that, my boss had me in such a rotten mood. Well, yeah, but you're still responsible for how you handle that rotten mood. So part of making an effective apology is saying, I am responsible for how I handled myself, and I handled this badly.
Mm-hmm. Sometimes a person will try to deflect the responsibility not on the other person per se, but maybe on some weakness of his. For example, a guy might say, well, I'm sorry about last night. I know I had too much to drink. I'll really be careful not to drink so much again. Is that taking responsibility?
It is if it doesn't become, well, I always drink too much of these things. That's just the way I am. And we'll get more into that when we get into the last element. But certainly, I think it's legitimate to say this is what happened from my perspective. I was in a really rotten mood because I was in physical pain, because I hadn't slept much the night before. As long as by doing that, all you're doing is giving background to explain your behavior and not coming up with a reason why it really wasn't your responsibility.
And as long as this isn't the 20th time you've gone through the same scenario.
Right. And again, we're going to come up with that again in a minute, too.
I know. I am getting ahead of myself here. But your third element is make amends. Now, other than verbally expressing your sincere regret, how do you make amends to someone?
I think this is the point where, and it takes a little creativity sometimes, you find a way to give back to the other person so that they're not only restored to where they were before you did whatever occasioned the apology, but something a little extra if you possibly can. I'm a great believer in lagniappe. So that if you are at a friend's house for dinner and you break a wine glass, replace it.
Yep.
If you have to have someone at the office stay late one night so that they miss an important event with their family, give them the next day off. Come up with something so that you let that person know that you're really making an effort to make them whole, to use lawyer terms, Jim, which I know you'll understand, so that what you're doing is you're restoring whatever it was that they lost because of your mistake. And if you can go a little bit beyond that, so much the better. Now, I will say I think gifts are really tricky. There's that cliche about the cheating husband who comes home with roses every Friday night. How many dozen roses does he think it's going to take before his wife throws them at him? But when a gift becomes a bribe, when it looks like what you're really trying to do is buy your way back into the other person's good graces, that's a mistake. But if the best thing you can do for someone is to restore something you've damaged or lost, to give them an experience that they've always wanted, movie tickets or theater tickets or something, for instance.
We've got to go. Excuse me, Lauren. We have to go into break, but I want to ask you when we get back about whether it's possible to ever do something where you can't make amends. And I'll explain that when we're back on Relationship Radio. This is Jim Duzak, and our guest is Lauren Bloom.
Ask the experts. Call toll-free right now, 1-866-472-5787. And ask our all-star team to answer your question. That's 1-866-472-5787.
Thank you for calling.
VoiceAmerica.com.
Hi, I'm Jim Duzak, host of Voice America's Relationship Radio. I'm the author of a book called Midlife Divorce and the Rebirth of Commitment. It's a book that deals not only with divorce, but with how to enhance your marriage and possibly avoid divorce. Every chapter of the book contains real-world information and advice on issues like sex, money, communication, in-law problems, and the temptation to have an affair. For those thinking of separating or filing for divorce, the book explains how to do it the right way. It also deals with the critical issues of life after divorce, including when to start dating again and how to avoid repeating the mistakes of the past. If you visit my website, www.attorneyatlove.com, you can read excerpts from all 17 chapters of the book. If you'd like to order the book, the site has direct links to Amazon.com and the other major online booksellers. And you can use the site to contact me. I'd love to hear from you.
The latest business information is made simple with the Voice America Business Network. The professionals in the business world bring you live talk radio shows featuring an array of business topics. strategies for building wealth, sales and marketing, stock trading, investing, and business technology. Voice America Business hosts are professionals in their fields and bring to the airwaves weekly business discussions that offer up-to-date information, advice, and education. The Voice America Business Network, the bottom line in business talk. Want to have behind-the-scenes access to some of the greatest minds of today? On Shift in Action, we feature leading-edge innovators who are building a more conscious, sustainable, and healthy culture. Host Stephen Dinan offers live shows with evolutionary leaders such as Deepak Chopra, Van Jones, and others who are creating new paradigms for conscious living. You can keep your finger on the pulse of the latest frontier work with our weekly transmission of Inspired Wisdom on Shift in Action, broadcast live every Tuesday at 9 a.m. Pacific Time, noon Eastern Time on Voice America.
Stimulating talk.
Gets those synapses in the brain firing really fast.
All the time. The #1 Internet talk station where your opinion counts. VoiceAmerica.com.
You're listening to Relationship Radio with your host, Jim Duzak, an inside look at marriage, divorce, and midlife dating. Now, back to Jim Duzak.
Hello again. Our guest today is Lauren Bloom, the author of the critically acclaimed book, The Art of the Apology. Lauren's website is www.artoftheapology.com. In fact, Lauren's book was described by Rabbi Harold Kushner, who you may know as the author of the bestseller When Bad Things Happen to Good People, as a splendid little book that encourages the development of honesty and humility, which is no small gift. Lauren, we really do need more honesty and humility in our relationships, don't we?
Oh, absolutely. I think it's so tough to let your guard down and just admit that you're human, but hey, we all are.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. You know, before we went to break, we were talking about making amends, and I'm wondering if there are situations that people can find themselves in where what they did was either so nasty or so egregious or whatever, that it's almost impossible to make amends. You know, you read in a newspaper about Bernard Madoff, for example. You know, is there any way that, you know, short of forfeiting every penny he has, is there any way that a person like that can make amends to his victims?
I think there is, but I think it takes time and effort. So a long effort over a long period of time. I mean, at this point, we don't even know where the money is. And certainly one way for him to start making amends would be to help the prosecutors find it. Mm-hmm. I think when someone really messes up, then the bigger the mistake, the harder you're going to have to work to make amends and set things right. And that's when just putting people back to where they were really isn't enough, where you really have to go the extra mile and recognize that it's going to take a long time. You know, again, going back to our mutual background as attorneys, you know the criminal justice system has decided that one of the ways you make amends when you committed a crime is to serve a certain amount of time in jail. But I think we also all know that as far as society is concerned, that's just the beginning of making amends. Once you get out, there's a whole other set of hurdles you have to jump before society will take you back.
Restitution and probation and everything else.
Absolutely.
You know, we were talking before the break also about your six essential elements of an effective apology, and the fourth one that you say in your book is express appreciation. You're talking about appreciation for the person that you've hurt. Is that right?
Absolutely. And you know, it is so important, and this is the element that people forget the most often. Mm-hmm. They think that if they say, "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have done that," that's enough. And it is in terms of following the socially polite form of an apology. If you say those things, then you've made an apology. But if you want the apology to be effective, this is the point where it's important to tell that other person what it is about him or her that you really value, why they're important in your life. It's different, obviously, if you're talking to a valued customer than if you're talking to your spouse. Mm-hmm. But typically, I tell people, when in doubt, overdo it. You may find yourself saying things that your spouse has been waiting to hear for decades.
I was going to say, that's right. Things that for whatever reason, you do. So many people in marriages especially, they just have this attitude that, oh, well, he knows or she knows how much I love her.
Oh, no. No, he or she doesn't. You know, nobody can get inside your head, which means that nobody knows what you're thinking but you, and you may not always be sure sometimes. I'm not always. So if you've injured someone, the evidence in front of them is that you must not love them very much because, after all, look what you did.
That's right.
So if you're going to make an apology, it's important to explain that that person really does matter to you. Maybe is the most important thing in your life. You can't imagine life without her.
Mm-hmm.
If you ever thought he was going to leave you, you'd just die. Say those things. And don't worry about going too far over the top unless you're sort of a natural drama queen or king. Most people are going to be so embarrassed and self-conscious that they won't say enough rather than saying too much.
That's really good advice, and so is your fifth element of an effective apology, which is listen. Listen to what the other person says after you deliver your apology. I've always been convinced that people nowadays don't do enough listening, right? We're always one step ahead trying to think of the next thing we can say.
Sure. And honestly, this is part of making amends, and it's the part everybody hates the most, because this is where you get to hear the other person tell you at whatever length just what a skunk you are and how stupid and hurtful and nasty what you did was. Mm-hmm. But if you've hurt someone badly enough that they feel that way, then you owe it to them to give them an opportunity to vent a little bit. So sit back and listen and try to understand instead of making it easy. Bite your tongue, too, because you're probably going to be tempted to, as we said before, try to defend yourself. Right. And if this is serious enough that you're making an apology that's important enough that you read my book before you did it, take the time and let that person have his or her say.
Yeah, that's a really good point. The last of your 6 essential elements is, I guess you could say, is probably the most important one of all, in a way. Do better next time.
Yeah, we all have weaknesses. Everybody's got their shortcomings, and everybody particularly has things that they're just prone to do. You know, you mentioned the guy who says, well, I tend to drink too much. For me, the big thing is I tend to run 5-10 minutes late because I always think I'm going to get one more thing done before I take off for wherever I am.
Yep.
And I've had to, in fact, there's a whole chapter in the book about learning from your apologies. That if you find yourself apologizing for the same thing several times in a row, maybe you need to make some changes. For me, it was a matter of saying, all right, my to-do list is not more important than the other person's time. And if I can't get done, then I need to get up earlier or go to bed later or something, but I need to not assume that the person I'm meeting is going to forgive me because whatever I had to do seemed that important.
And, if you don't make those changes, your credibility with this other person is going to be shot. Your
Sure.
apology will be just seen as something, you say when you get caught.
Exactly.
You do it by
the first
rote
apology
almost.
is easy to accept. The fifth is not.
That's right. Well, those are, and I think in your book, as well as giving advice on how to make an apology, you have a chapter, I think, on how to accept an apology.
I do, because I think it's important, and I think particularly if an apology hasn't been delivered well, there's going to be a tendency for the person getting that apology to be offended all over again.
Mm-hmm.
And that can even, in a bizarre way, feel really good, because after all, first of all, this person wronged you, and then he or she gave you this really insulting apology, and boy, I'm superior.
Yep.
Which can make you feel good in the short term, but it's lousy for your relationships in the long term. So I did write a separate chapter on how to accept an apology when it's offered, even if the apology isn't necessarily world-class.
Does accepting an apology imply forgiveness at all times?
I think it can, but I don't think forgiveness means that you go back to the way things were before the event occurred.
Mm-hmm. You don't pretend that it
Particularly when
didn't.
you're talking about something serious. I mean, if your spouse didn't listen to you on one occasion and as a result you had a minor misunderstanding, then that's one thing. But when you're talking about infidelity, mishandling of family money, losing a job and not telling the spouse about it for weeks or months, all kinds of things that are really pretty serious, then you can forgive, but that doesn't mean that things are going to ever be the same.
Mm-hmm. Lauren, in talking about all this, I'm wondering what you think psychologically is the biggest obstacle to apologizing. We all, both you and I, and most of the world, sees the need for apology, and yet we also recognize that in so many cases, it's not given. Do you think it's pride or embarrassment or just a refusal to admit that you could possibly be wrong?
I think it's a combination of those things, and I think it all comes down to fear. I think when people are unwilling to apologize, it's because they're afraid the other person will think less of them.
Yeah.
They're afraid that the other person will turn it against them. They're afraid the other person will take advantage somehow.
Yeah.
Or they're afraid that they will bare their souls and the other person will reject them.
Yeah, all of those are fear-inducing things. And then I suppose there's the old standby, maybe it will go away. You know, if I just ignore it or if enough time goes by, she'll forget it, and, it's as if it never happened. But things don't go away on their own, do they?
Things don't go away on their own. You can be in a relationship with someone where there are other things about the relationship that you value so much, or the trust you have in this person is so strong that if they mess up, okay, well, that was a mistake and it was dumb, but I love him and we'll get by this. But it never didn't happen, to use a double negative. Whatever you did happened.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't apologize for it, your partner is going to know, first of all, that it happened, and second, that you either didn't have the humility or the courage or the love to apologize for it.
Mm.
So then you've offended your partner twice.
You're absolutely right. What about the timing of an apology? You know, if you're face-to-face with someone and it's obvious that that person took offense at something you said, should you apologize right away, or does it just make it look as if you said just anything to get out of an awkward situation?
Well, I think an apology can be a process. And certainly if you're clearly faced with a very upset or angry spouse, saying something is going to be better than nothing. But I also think that it's very easy to toss off an apology too quickly and have it seem as though it's perfunctory. It's just, yeah, anything to get you off my back. I'm sorry, all right? Well, that's not an apology.
Yep.
So when it's possible, particularly if it's something significant, I usually encourage people to take some time to sit down and think before they make an apology about what really happened, what they're really sorry about, what they're really willing to do to make amends, and how to deliver the apology so that it'll have the best effect. That way, when you do then go to make your apology, you've got a much better chance of getting it right.
The only problem I would think in marriage or in any situation where two people are living together is that you may not have the leisure, so to speak, of mulling it over and waiting for that right moment, because you're still interacting with the other person, and maybe as each minute goes by, he or she is thinking, so he's not going to apologize to me.
Well, and that's true. I think it's especially difficult when you're right in the heat of the moment, which is why sometimes maybe you need to go for a walk. That's one of the many advantages of having a family dog is in the middle of an argument you can say, look, I need to calm down. I'm going to go take Fido. I'll be back in 10 minutes.
That's a great suggestion. We've got to take another break, but we will be back shortly with our guest, Lauren M. Bloom, the author of The Art of the Apology. This is Jim Duzak.
Talk, talk, talk. That's all we do is talk. If you'd like to talk, call us toll-free right now at 1-866-472-5787. 1-866-472-5787. That's it. VoiceAmerica.com.
Hi, I'm Jim Duzak, host of Voice America's Relationship Radio. I'm the author of a book called Midlife Divorce and the Rebirth of Commitment. It's a book that deals not only with divorce, but with how to enhance your marriage and possibly avoid divorce. Every chapter of the book contains real-world information and advice on issues like sex, money, communication, in-law problems, and the temptation to have an affair. For those thinking of separating or filing for divorce, the book explains how to do it the right way. It also deals with the critical issues of life after divorce, including when to start dating again and how to avoid repeating the mistakes of the past. If you visit my website, www.attorneyatlove.com, you can read excerpts from all 17 chapters of the book. If you'd like to order the book, the site has direct links to Amazon.com and the other major online booksellers. And you can use the site to contact me. I'd love to hear from you.
Are you ready to grow your business? Listen for the Independent Business Owners Show with your coach, Rick Corrado. This entertaining talk radio program will bring you the tools to help increase your business. You'll learn sales success, time management, lead generation, business development, life balance, and much more. Rick Corrado is here to help you take your business to the next level. Listen for the Independent Business Owners Show, heard live every Monday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, 8 a.m. Pacific on the Voice America Business Network.
The biggest secret about men is that they are far more complicated than we often give them credit for. Join Dr. Chris Blazina as we discover more about the secret lives of men. This is an informative and positive program exploring the various facets of men's lives, from growing up to growing old. The Secret Lives of Men with Dr. Chris Blazina is broadcast live every Tuesday afternoon at 5 p.m. Eastern Time, 2 p.m. Pacific Time on Voice America.
Streaming live, the leader in Internet Talk Radio, VoiceAmerica.com.
You're listening to Relationship Radio with your host, Jim Duzak, an inside look at marriage, divorce, and midlife dating. Now, back to Jim Duzak.
Hello again. We've been talking with Lauren Bloom, the author of The Art of the Apology, about apologies from many different angles here, and when to give them and how to accept them. And I think just before the break, we were talking about how sometimes you need to think a little bit before you deliver an apology properly. I wonder if there are times, Lauren, when the issue is so emotionally charged that it's almost impossible to for either side to talk about it without tensions boiling over. I'm wondering if maybe there are times when, instead of trying to express it orally, that you should put your thoughts in writing at a time when both you're calm, and then you can deliver it to your spouse at a time when he's calm. Does that make sense sometimes?
I think it can. It's funny. I usually tell people if you can apologize in person, do it. Mm-hmm. Because that's the bravest way to do it. You're face-to-face with that other person. You see all the hurt feelings and the anger right up front and personal. But sometimes you're right. If emotions are really high and both parties are so angry or upset that they can't talk rationally about it, I think there's a lot to be said for taking a step back, walking away, and going and writing a letter. Just be careful. Because I guarantee that what you write will not be read in your voice. It will be read in the voice of the other person who's reading it and who is already angry and upset with you.
Well, it's very hard for people who aren't professional writers, let's say, or even if they are, but if they write at a time when they're feeling the emotion, it's hard not to convey sarcasm, for example.
Sarcasm, anger, rationalization, lots of excuses, or saying too much. I think sometimes a note as simple as, "I'm sorry, can we talk about this?" Mm-hmm. Or, "I'm sorry, I love you, can we talk about this?" is going to go further than 5 pages.
Yeah, you're right. It seems that before, by the time you're into the second paragraph, you're putting everything in all caps.
Right.
And it sounds like you're screaming at the other person.
And that's never good. This, by the way, is one of the many reasons I tell people never to apologize by email or text message. Mm-hmm. Both of them are, particularly text, ye gods. I know of no better way to say, I couldn't be bothered to apologize to you, really, than to text an apology. But even email looks so informal, and it's frequently badly spelled and carelessly written. And so you really run a tremendous risk that the other person is going to say either she didn't care enough to really talk to me in person, or look at this mess, he couldn't even be bothered to run spell check. And so you've offended someone all over again. Now, there is another venue. The card stores are full of I'm sorry cards. Mm-hmm. And some of them are very good. They're a great place to start. The problem with them is that they weren't written by you.
Yeah.
So if you're going to give an apology that begins with a card, I think it's absolutely critical to write even just a short note in your own handwriting. I'm sorry, I love you, can we talk? And that may be enough to give you the words you're having trouble finding while still making it personal enough that the other person will know you went to some effort to try to reach out to them.
I think that could be particularly useful for men, because a lot of guys, they get, even the most articulate guy, you get somebody who's a college professor or something, but when he has to talk to his wife or his girlfriend about something in their relationship, he becomes like a 15-year-old teenage kid in terms of his verbal ability, and I wonder what you thought of this. As I was reading your book, I was wondering if you think, you didn't say this in the book, but I just wondered do you think that women are better at apologizing than men in general? In other words, that women, are typically believed to be more comfortable about expressing their emotions and so forth. And I just wondered if you think that women will be quicker to apologize in a situation.
All right, let me start by apologizing to everyone of both genders in your audience, because I am going to generalize here, and I typically don't. I think women have more practice. Mm-hmm. This is changing, I hope, because I'd like to think that a generation or two from now, the cultural divisions between men and women won't be quite as strong as they are today. Mm. But certainly, as I was growing up, as I watched my parents and grandparents and their friends, as I watched my peers, even as I watch people from the generation behind mine, what I find is that girls find it easier to say, I'm sorry, because they're taught to do it at a much younger age. In fact, if anything, I think what happens is girls say, I'm sorry too much. So that when they do say it can sound like it's simply perfunctory rather than intentional. It's raining this morning, oh, I'm sorry. Well, that's kind of silly, too. But I do think that for guys, it can be very hard to say, I'm sorry, because in this Wild West culture, big, strong man never says he's sorry. That's a sign of weakness. Now, I don't agree with that. I think that it takes a lot of courage for a man to stand up and say, I made a mistake, I'm sorry. Mm-hmm. Certainly I thought it was impressive as all get out when the presidential cabinet nominees started falling left and right, and President Obama went on national television and said, America, I blew it. Now, I asked a lot of audiences about that since. Every single audience I've asked, the overwhelming majority of people there have more respect for him now than they did before he did that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's oftentimes a male trait to do just the opposite. Just to cling to whatever little shred of evidence is left that you might have been right. Even when the overwhelming weight of the evidence is against you. And in some quarters, that's considered admirable. He believes in what he says. And that kind of thing.
And that's fine, but I think being right is wildly overrated. Mm-hmm. Particularly because so often being right just means that more people agree with your particular point of view. I mean, when you look at the news, for instance, how much of what passes for fact is really just collective opinion?
That's right.
And so if it's that important to you to be right, then be right. But recognize that even when you're right, you can be gracious to your partner.
That's a really good point. I think you say in your book, I think the last chapter of your book, I don't remember the exact title of it, but it's something about apologies, creating a better world or something like that.
Creating an apology-friendly world.
That's right.
I think we would all be so much better off if we could stand down, take a deep breath, and just admit that we're all human, we've all messed up, we're all products of our upbringings and our environments, and every last one of us has made a mistake at some point in their lives. Mm-hmm. So as long as that's true, nobody's perfect, so why do we keep pretending?
That's a really good point. And, although we've been talking today in large part about the mechanics of apologizing, the how-tos and the do's and don'ts and so forth, but, in a bigger picture, an apology it really can be a tool for rebuilding trust in a relationship, can't it?
Oh, without question. I certainly have seen with my clients, when a mistake was made, the more quickly they said, okay, I made a mistake, this is what it is, this is what the effect of it is, and this is what I would suggest that we do to correct it. Their clients and customers say, okay, you're human, you admitted it, great, let's fix it. And they appreciate my client even more and trust my client even more because my client was so honest.
Mm-hmm. Have you found a lot of resistance to your ideas, particularly among legal groups, because it just sort of flies in the face of hundreds of years of legal tradition, particularly in the liability area of don't you dare apologize, it'll be used against you?
Oh, absolutely. You and I both went to law school, so we were trained that if you're defending a client, you never admit anything. You make the other side prove it. Well, that may be good litigation strategy, but I think it's not good for ongoing relationships, and frankly, it's hell on wheels for the people involved. I've worked as a trial attorney, and I've seen the damage that can be done in the context of litigation. Ultimately, nobody wins. Even if you win the case, you've spent how much money, you've lost how many hours of sleep, how many opportunities for productive work, your business has been turned upside down because you can't so much as throw a piece of paper in the trash without worrying about discovery. It's a horrible way to solve problems. And I think it's even worse when you start getting into the personal realm. How many divorces happen today because somebody was unable or willing to admit that they made a mistake and apologize?
You're absolutely right. That kind of stubbornness, it just, there are some people that just can't get beyond that. As we were saying before about how you have to be right. And, it's a bad quality to have. I sometimes have asked people, what's more important to you? Do you want to be right or do you want to be happily married?
Exactly.
Because most of the time you can't be both.
Well, and even if you're right, if the only way you can be right is to really hurt your partner, then maybe you're not as right as you think.
That's right.
Maybe you're right about whatever it is you're discussing. But if with that comes the urge to punish, to put down, to lord it over your partner, then that's not right, regardless of where you are on the merits of whatever you're discussing.
And you're right. And so many of the people that seem to be into that, they're humorless, really, in their declarations. It's not in the context of a little repartee or give and take or laughing at your mistakes or something. It's dead serious stuff for some of these people.
And if that's that important to them, all right. But then understand that you're going to go through a lot of friends and going to fight with your family and probably get divorced maybe more than once in a lifetime, and your kids are going to resent you. You'll have been right, but look how many people you will have alienated along the way.
At what price?
Yeah.
This is, I said this before in the show, but I really mean it. Your book came along at the right time. It might have been even better if it had come along 20 years ago, but I think it's something that is really going to catch on, probably is catching on already, because it's, again, in the world we live in, there is so much of a need for this. So unfortunately, we have to go into our final break, but I want to thank our guest, Lauren Blum, for being with us today. Lauren's book is The Art of the Apology, How to Apologize Effectively to Practically Anyone, and her website is www.artoftheapology.com. Once again, thank you, Lauren.
Thank you, Jim. This has really been a pleasure. I've enjoyed it.
And when we come back, I'll tell you why trial separations are often a disaster. Stay tuned and find out why. I'm Jim Duzak, and this is Relationship Radio.
Have you ever thought about having your own internet talk show? Well, if you said yes, then click About Us. Then click Be a Host to get more information. Or just call Jeff Spinard at 480-294-6417.
Say that again?
480-294-6417. VoiceAmerica.com.
Hi, I'm Jim Duzak, host of Voice America's Relationship Radio. I'm the author of a book called Midlife Divorce and the Rebirth of Commitment. It's a book that deals not only with divorce, but with how to enhance your marriage and possibly avoid divorce. Every chapter of the book contains real-world information and advice on issues like sex, money, communication, in-law problems, and the temptation to have an affair. For those thinking of separating or filing for divorce, the book explains how to do it the right way. It also deals with the critical issues of life after divorce, including when to start dating again and how to avoid repeating the mistakes of the past. If you visit my website, www.attorneyatlove.com, you can read excerpts from all 17 chapters of the book. If you'd like to order the book, the site has direct links to Amazon.com and the other major online booksellers. And you can use the site to contact me. I'd love to hear from you.
Total career success. What does it mean to you? Voice America presents a radio program dedicated to help you achieve your career goal. Even in times of economic uncertainty, you can achieve your financial goals. Whether you're a college grad, new in the working environment, or a top-level executive, you will benefit from the practical and proven advice on job search and career advancement. Join Ken and Cheryl Dawson every Monday at 9 a.m. Pacific, noon Eastern for Total Career Success on Voice America.
Wake up with a unique daily show. Listen for Mitchell John in the morning. Mitchell will bring you news, sports, and stock news from yesterday. You'll hear interviews from high-profile figures from the world of sports, entertainment, politics, and authors. Mitchell will talk to people throughout America. This is a show that throws right down the center. It's fun, information, and yes, even a little bit of music. Catch Mitchell John in the morning at 6 a.m. Pacific Time, Mondays, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Fridays on Voice America, and Thursdays on the Voice America Business Network.
The Internet's number one talk station. Number one talk station. VoiceAmerica.com.
You're listening to Relationship Radio with your host, Jim Duzak, an inside look at marriage, divorce, and midlife dating. Now, back to Jim Duzak.
Welcome back. I may have mentioned earlier that in addition to being an author and a talk show host, I'm a lawyer. Since lawyers always love to plead their case, I call the final segment of each show my closing argument. What I try to do each week is to make my case, so to speak, on a particular relationship issue and offer some advice that you may be able to use right now. The issue I'd like to discuss today is why trial separations are often a disaster. A trial separation, in theory, is a chance for a couple to live separately for a while and somehow try to figure out whether their marriage can be saved or is worth saving. Although there is such a thing as a legal separation, which is similar in certain ways to a divorce, except that the couple remains legally married, a trial separation typically has no court involvement at all. The husband and wife more or less make up their own rules as they go along, and often they're groping in the dark, without a clear idea of where they're headed or what they're trying to accomplish. I can certainly understand why couples sometimes need to take a break from each other. When the two of you are fighting about the same things over and over, you can start feeling that one more day together will put you over the top. You're not necessarily sure you want a divorce, but you need some time to breathe, some time to think, and you don't seem to be able to get it when you're both sharing the same space. All that makes sense. But there are two big problems with trial separations. The first is that there can be all kinds of legal issues that you never thought about, but which can lead to trouble. The second is that your trial separation may mean one thing to you psychologically, but something entirely different to your spouse. The legal issues that can lead to trouble usually involve money and kids. The laws are different in every state, but in most places you could be accused of theft if you sell property that is considered jointly owned by your spouse, or if you clean out joint bank accounts and use the money for your own benefit. And if you unilaterally take your kids with you out of state, even if it's just to stay for a while at your parents' house, your spouse could accuse you of kidnapping. Because there are so many possible legal consequences of actions that you might take during a separation, I recommend that you talk to a lawyer before you separate. A one-time consultation may be all you need to learn your rights and responsibilities and keep you from inadvertently getting into a legal mess. Of course, you could also ask the lawyer about the pros and cons of a legal separation and how it would work in your case. But I also recommend that you talk to a marriage counselor. It's possible that marriage counseling may prevent the need for a separation, but even if separation can't be avoided, a good marriage counselor can help you and your spouse negotiate the terms of your separation, including the personal ground rules that need to be addressed before your separation begins. For example, who's staying in the house and who's moving out? If your husband is the one moving out, under what circumstances can he come back during the separation? Can he stop by to pick up the golf clubs he forgot to take with him? Can he come over just to say hello? And how much notice should he give, if any? 24 hours, 2 hours, 10 minutes? And how long will the separation last? Will there be a certain minimum period, say 1 to 3 months, or is it going to be a day-to-day decision? And what about sex? Will having sex with your spouse during the separation make it easier or harder to be objective about your marriage? And how about sex with other people? It's usually uncomfortable to talk with your spouse about such a possibility, but you've got to. If the wife, for example, is the one who wants the separation, a lot of husbands will start saying to themselves, hey, if she doesn't want me, maybe somebody else will. And the problem is not just adultery, as troubling as that may be. The problem is that no one can take a hard look at himself and at his marriage if his time, energy, and affections are being diverted by the pursuit of new partners. And taking a hard look at yourself and your marriage is the whole point of a separation. If one of you is going to be seeing other people, you may as well forget the separation and just file for divorce. I know it's hard to think straight and plan properly when you're under intense stress, which is exactly why you should get some clear-headed advice from a lawyer and a marriage counselor before you storm out of the house and do something you might regret later. So those are my thoughts on trial separations. It's one of those things that you can understand why people are doing it, but it is one of those things that's just an accident waiting to happen. I've seen more trial separations that have inadvertently led to divorce than the ones that have really accomplished their purpose. I'd like to talk a little bit about our guest next week. Her name is Kelly McDaniel, and she's a nationally known therapist and workshop leader from San Antonio, Texas. She specializes in love, sex, and relationship addictions. In fact, she's written a book on the subject called Ready to Heal. I've been reading the book over the past few days, and I can tell you that it is pretty powerful stuff. A lot of us have the idea that love, sex, relationships, these are all good things. But for some people who are truly addicted to that, it's anything but a good thing. The love, the sex, the relationships can actually ruin a life. You really don't want to miss this show. It's going to be next Friday, April 3rd at 2 p.m. Pacific time. I'd also like to mention, for those of you who are in book clubs, particularly clubs that read nonfiction books, that I have a standing offer that if you choose to read my book, Midlife Divorce and the Rebirth of Commitment, as your book of the month, I'll be happy to appear by telephone at your meeting and speak to the members either individually or by speakerphone. And if your club meets anywhere in southern Arizona, where I live, I'll appear in person. So, take me up on the offer. You're not going to get that from Dr. Phil or Dr. Laura or any of these other relationship people. Maybe you'd rather have Dr. Phil than me, but that's okay. I'll be happy to appear, and I think we can have a great conversation. All you really need to do is just email me at jim@attorneyatlove.com, ATTORNEYATLOVE.com, and we can work out the details. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the show, I really do love hearing from my listeners. I get emails from people all the time, and sometimes people ask me if I can help solve a problem of theirs. I'll do my best to try. Obviously, I can't, even though I am a lawyer, this show is naturally not intended to constitute legal advice, and I can't give legal advice to people by email or over the phone or anything of that nature, but I'm always happy to listen to your situation, to talk to you, to offer some advice, and maybe just some sympathy. But I do enjoy hearing from people, and if you have some suggestions on topics that you'd like me to address, or if you know of particular people who might make a good guest on the show, particularly somebody who is considered an expert in some area of marriage, divorce, or post-divorce dating. I'd love to hear from you and talk to that person. So, until next week, have a great weekend and spread some love around. I'm Jim Duzak. This is Relationship Radio. Goodbye for now.
Thanks again for joining us this week on Relationship Radio with Jim Duzak. Please join us again next Friday at 5 p.m. Eastern Time, 2 p.m. Pacific Time on Voice America. Have a great weekend.
Thanks again for listening to the preceding program, brought to you on the Voice America Variety Channel. For more information about our network and to check out additional show hosts and topics of interest, please visit voiceamericavariety.com. The Voice America Talk Radio Network is the worldwide leader in